Welcome to the Tomiczek Financial Channel, and we are here today. We have our in-house expert, Pierre Tomiczek, with us. He has 30 years experience in financial planning. I'm Joshua Bissoon. I'll be spearheading this interview, and we're going to be hearing from Pierre today and all he has to offer us in terms of his advice, his wealth of knowledge, and that's what we want to hear from him today. So welcome, Pierre. How are you today?
I feel great. Well, thank you very much for that great introduction. I don't know if I'll be able to live up to that great introduction.
I'm sure you can.
I'll do my best, Josh.
And as we said, you've got 30 years of experience. So you know the ins and outs of what is expected. So we as international students, we tend to get a lot of debt at this time because our income is not sustaining us. We might be involved in part-time jobs, but however, we accumulate a lot of debt at this time, but we also want to know what's going to happen to us when we finish graduating. Are we going to have enough money to sustain that? We might have goals in mind. So what is your first advice in terms of dealing with all of that situation that we have to confront?
It's funny you say that, Josh. A lot of my students and clients also, not necessarily international students or domestic students, so one of the first things they'll ask me is, Pierre, how could I invest my money? How could I double my money, triple my money, and so on and so forth? But the first thing that I always go back to is, do you have debt? If you have debt, the first thing that you should do is trying to bring down the debt or eliminate your debt, because most of your debt are spent in after-tax dollars. So before you could start investing, let's look at ways to minimize the amount of debt. And then once we've minimized that amount and we've secured, a low-level amount of debt, now we'll look at managing your money and looking at other goals that you may have.
So you mentioned that these goals and these ways that we can. Is there any particulars that you can mention there and how we can manage our debt?
Definitely. So number one, pay off your credit card debt, because on average it's about 24%. So in order for saving to make sense, I would have to return roughly about 30 or 35% before taxes. Right. So whatever extra money that you have, so let's say you have about $100 on a monthly basis in surplus, let's allocate a certain percentage, 50, 75% of your surplus to eliminate your debt. Once the debt is eliminated, then your cash flow will increase, and with that extra cash flow, we could allocate it towards other goals.
All right, so you've mentioned there a lot about how we can manage our debt, paying off our credit cards first, because it's something that is easily accessible and the interest rates tend to be high. But how can we use debt to our advantage? That's the first question I want to ask. And you also mentioned there that I picked up on is that you mentioned excess cash flows. So how can we use that as well to our advantage?
Excellent questions. So one of the things that you want to do is to kind of build your credit score. In Canada, unfortunately, in North America, in order to have a good, sustainable standard of living, credit is going to be important. So by lowering your debt, especially your credit card debt, if you're able to keep your balance below 60% of the credit limit, that will boost your credit score. One of the two major aspects that they look at is, one, they look at, do you pay your debt in a timely manner? And two, they also, do you carry too much debt? If you carry too much debt, that will lower your credit score. So once we've met that, we've lowered our debt, we've boosted our credit score, which will give us the ability in the future to maybe purchase a home because we have, good credit. Now we've got extra cash flow, and with that extra cash flow, before we start allocating towards stocks, bonds, mutual funds, let's create an emergency fund. Just in case, the worst case scenario, we need to have some money liquid available to take care of us if we should become disabled or lose a job.
So you mentioned emergency fund. What duration of time are we looking at for an emergency fund?
Prior to COVID, most financial planners said 3 to 6 months worth of income or expenses. After COVID has taught us that, a lot of people were out of work for about a year, 2,
Right.
So now, kind of my rule of thumb would be about 6 months to about a year's worth of income or expenses in liquid form, not invested in the stock market, invested in a high interest savings account from one of the digital banks, which will probably yield you about 3 to 4% and potentially higher.
Because you need access to that. That's why it's called an emergency fund. So having it in stocks and bonds might be difficult to get it when you really need it.
Exactly, Josh, exactly.
So we spoke about now managing your debt, having this excess cash flow to save. So how do you go about managing? So you're getting income. How do you go about managing all of that? Managing your debt, managing your income, and maybe spending on basic things like transportation, grocery. These are your everyday essential needs. How do I manage that?
One of the popular rule of thumb is the 50-30-20 rule. Basically what that implies is that 50% of your income should go toward things like your rent, groceries, and so on, the housing costs. And then 30% of your income should go towards things like, entertainment, things of that nature. If, do your hair, if there is any in terms of going to the salon, things that you will enjoy to do. And then lastly, 20% of your income should go towards debt repayment and savings. So once we've eliminated the debt or brought it down, now we've got about 20% of our income that we could allocate towards things like a TFSA or an RRSP.
And I know you mentioned like 50% going towards those essential expenses like your rent and your groceries. And I think one of the things that you can do there is also save in those regards in terms of your groceries. You can compare across platforms, look for deals. There are seasonal discounts that you can enjoy. You talk about transportation, maybe there are student discounts that you can enjoy there as well. So all of those things can work, and that extra income you can allocate towards that 20% that you mentioned, or that 30%.
Definitely. If you could bring down the housing costs, probably not rent, but maybe groceries, but maybe looking for deals, looking for coupons. I know there's a lot of people are not too happy in terms of coupons, but instead of shopping at the big box stores such as, your Sobeys, your Metro, maybe you look at No Frills, right?
Yeah.
The smaller outfit where you could find deals, and as a result of that could help you in terms of reducing your groceries and other types of costs,
which I think again essential in the long-term planning. You mentioned two things there moments ago: TFSA, RRSP. Can you shed a little bit of light on those two? Why should we use them?
Yeah, so the as you know, I mean, you've been in my class. First day in one of my classes, one of the things I shocked our students with is the fact that 60 to 70% of your income that you make, you're gonna pay in one way, shape, or another in the form of either direct taxation or indirect taxation. So the government loves our money, right? They love to tax us, and it doesn't matter who's in power. So how could we save as much as we possibly can without giving 60 to 70% of our income to the government?
Right.
Well, one of the ways is to use some of the mechanisms, some of the tools that they've made available. One, the TFSA, tax-free savings account, and basically the investment that you generate inside this type of account grows tax-free. And when you take it out, it also comes out on a tax-free nature. And then the second, if you've maxed out your TFSA and you still have some extra income, let's look at the RRSP, the Registered Retirement Savings Plan. One of the good things about the RRSP that the TFSA doesn't have is that when you contribute towards an RRSP, it reduces your income, and as a result of that, you probably will generate a tax refund. And what do you do with the refund? Don't go spending it.
Right.
You could either now use it to reinvest, or pay down debt, or a combination of the two.
So you mentioned, and I know there are do's and don'ts of each of these accounts. I guess in subsequent videos, when we have more time, we'll discuss on those. But you mentioned these two accounts and using it to your advantage. But also, what about a situation where you might find that you're not earning any income, or maybe it's a small amount. How can I use my small income to benefit in terms of these accounts or outside of these accounts?
Number one, and it's hard to imagine, file your taxes. If you're making less than $15,000 a year in Canada, you don't pay any taxes. So what that means, it means all of the taxes that were deducted from your part-time work, you're going to get that back at the end of April or beginning of May when you file your taxes. Two, April 1st was yesterday.
Yeah.
And we had the new carbon tax. Right. One of the things that the carbon tax also brings us is kind of a carbon tax rebate for 80% of Canadians, so they say. So you're going to get, by filing your taxes, if you're in a low income situation, you're going to get every 3 months a quarterly benefit called the Climate Action Incentive Relief. So file your taxes, even if you don't make any money. You're going to get money back from the government for the carbon tax, and also if you're renting, there's also such a thing in Ontario called the Ontario Trillium benefit that is accessible for low-income individuals. And if you happen to have kids and you're also low income, there's also the child benefit that you will be receiving. All of these benefits are only available if you file your taxes.
So important to file your taxes. April 30th is the deadline.
Definitely.
Now I want to talk a little bit more on filing your taxes, because this will be the first year that I'm filing my taxes in Canada. So I've got, for my college, my tuition payments, it's about $15,800 thereabout for last year. Should I put that in my tax returns this year? Should I not? How do I maximize that benefit, as an international student?
Well, firstly, thank you as an international student for paying such a high tuition.
You're welcome.
It helps our Canadian economy. I mean, aside, joking aside, one of the things that I tell my students is that in Canada, as I just mentioned, if you make less than $15,000, you pay no taxes anyway. So therefore, if you're going to make less than $15,000, do not claim your tuition tax credit. Carry that forward for future years when you're going to earn in excess of the basic personal amount, which happens to be $15,000. So therefore, include it in your tax return to show that yes, Humber's provided me $15,800 in tuition amount, but you're not going to claim it. You're going to carry that forward for future years. Now, if you make more than $15,000, then what you want to do is, maybe with the help of your tax professional, or if you go to one of those services like H&R Block or Liberty Tax Services, find out what's the optimal amount. So let's say I've got $15,000 in tuition tax credit, but if I only use $5,000 of the 15, it will bring me down to the $15,000 threshold where I pay no taxes anyway. And as a result of that, you only claim 5 of the 15, so the remaining 10 you could carry that forward. So again, planning is important to make sure that you don't waste those tax credits and take advantage of the system that was provided by our government.
So one of the key questions for any student, and I've heard it in your class and I've heard it in other classes, when do I start investing my money? You mentioned stocks, you mentioned bonds, you mentioned T-bills. When can I start investing?
Yesterday. and if it's not yesterday, then today. Today would be the right day. You've heard one of the 8 wonders of the world is called compound interest.
I think so. I have heard that.
Yes. Yeah. So by investing early and investing often, your investment will grow. When is a good time to invest? At my age, no. When you're young, 20, 25, 30 years old, basically by investing as little as $25 on a monthly, weekly, bi-weekly basis, if you have that dedication and discipline and you invest that amount, and then as your income grows, you invest a bit more, you will see, and we've done the math, where by the time you retire, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that you could have about $1 million. So investing now would be a a good way.
And I think one of the things that helps with investing is seeking the experts' advice. And I think Tomiczek Financials, they do that. They help you to choose what's best for you, depending on who you are as an individual, because everyone's different in the amount of risk they're willing to take.
Exactly. So I don't have a one-size-fits-all type of solution, because one of the things I will do is get to know you better, get to know your personal situation, get to know your personal information, and as a result of that, get to know your risk tolerance. So based on all of those factors, I will create a suitable investment strategy that will not make you, again, lose all your hair with the ups and downs of the market. So something that will be created for you, that will provide you with peace of mind and hopefully grow within your long-term horizon.
And this seems to be like we can go on forever in terms of how we can invest and how we can use that. But I think we're going to do that another time because we're out of time today. So I want to thank you, Pierre, for coming today and sharing your advice, because we need it. We look for it and we don't have it. And we're glad that the people at Tomiczek Financials have decided to do this and how we can learn and stay on top of the game. And I want to thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for inviting me. So if I could just impart a couple of things is having a goal, having a plan is very, very important. And starting today, it's never too late to start. And starting today would be extremely important to do. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below if you have any questions or topics that you'd like to see in future videos. Thank you.